My best friend of 10 years framed me for cheating, until her laptop exposed the unthinkable. Chapter 1. The Blueprint of a Decade. There is a terrifying vulnerability in long-term friendships. When you have known someone since childhood, you stop looking at them with a critical eye. You share your secrets, your dreams, your keys, and your home, operating under the absolute assumption that their loyalty matches your own. For over 10 continuous years, she was my absolute best friend. She wasn't just a companion to me. She was my sister, my confidant, the one individual in the entire world I trusted with my life. But as I would eventually learn in the most devastating way possible to her, I was nothing more than an obstacle. I was a target. She had spent years harboring a toxic, silent resentment toward me for one simple, agonizing reason. I had married the man she desperately wanted for herself. Our shared history began 8 years ago during our very first year of college. We were young, idealistic, and navigating the exciting transition into adulthood. It was during this time that we met my future husband. At the time, he was a few years older than us and working as a graduate assistant for one of our primary university professors. The three of us hit it off immediately. We formed a tight-knit, inseparable trio, spending countless hours studying, laughing, and sharing meals together. Eventually, a natural romantic spark developed between him and me. We started dating, a progression that felt entirely organic to me. During that pivotal transition, my best friend never uttered a single word about having romantic feelings for him. She smiled, congratulated us, and played the part of the supportive best friend flawlessly. Because she hid her desires so perfectly, I never once questioned the dynamic. I felt incredibly blessed to have the love of my life and my lifelong best friend standing right beside me as we moved forward into the future. Over the next several years, our lives remained deeply intertwined. Because I viewed her as family, I trusted her implicitly with the most delicate details of our lives. When my husband and I decided to start a business venture together, she was right there, becoming a daily presence in our professional and personal lives. But the ultimate display of my trust occurred just 6 months ago. After months of careful planning, I discovered that I was pregnant. I was so overwhelmed with joy and emotion that the very first person I shared the news with was her. In fact, I took the pregnancy test in her bathroom, holding her hand while we waited for the results. When the test came back positive, we both burst into tears of absolute joy. She squeezed me tightly, promising to be the best aunt in the world. Looking back at that scene, my chest aches with a profound physical pain. I now know that every single tear she shed that afternoon was part of a cold, calculated performance. Chapter 2. The Digital Trap. Shortly after that beautiful milestone, the atmosphere in my marriage began to shift in a subtle, terrifying way. My husband, who had always been a deeply affectionate, attentive, and gentle partner, completely transformed. He became chronically distant, perpetually irritable, and would snap at me for absolutely no reason at all. For weeks, I walked on eggshells in my own home, utterly confused by his sudden hostility. I chalked it up to financial stress or the impending pressure of fatherhood. But eventually, the emotional distance became completely unbearable. Driven by a need for clarity, I finally confronted him in our living room. I demanded to know why he was treating me like an enemy. He looked at me with eyes full of absolute coldness and resentment. He told me that he was furious because he finally knew the absolute truth about who I really was. When I asked him what on earth he was talking about, he pulled out his phone and presented a series of printed screenshots and digital images. He called it his unshakable evidence of my infidelity. As I looked at the images, my mind went completely blank. The screen displayed a series of explicit, highly detailed chat logs from a prominent dating application. The profile belonged to a woman using my exact name, my personal details, and a collection of private photographs. These weren't photos pulled from my public social media accounts. These were candid, private pictures that existed solely within the internal storage of my personal devices. To anyone looking at the screen, It was an open and shut case. The content of those messages was designed to inflict maximum psychological damage on a husband. In the chat logs, this fake version of me was conversing with an anonymous man, explicitly stating that she was pregnant but had absolutely no idea whether the child belonged to her husband or to him. The messages went into graphic, agonizing detail about recent secret encounters that had supposedly taken place during the early months of my pregnancy. It was the ultimate betrayal, written out in black and white. I immediately began to panic, crying out that the entire profile was an absolute fabrication, a malicious hoax designed to destroy us. I demanded to know how he had obtained these horrific screenshots. He looked at me with absolute disgust and revealed the source. He told me that my lifelong best friend had come to him in tears, claiming that she could no longer look him in the eye while carrying such a heavy, shameful secret. She had told him that she had discovered my systemic infidelities and directed him to search for evidence on an old, forgotten mobile device that I used to keep in our shared office. He had followed her instructions, found the synchronized data, and had spent the last several weeks drowning in silent agony. Chapter 3: The Storm and the Departure. The realization of who had done this hit me like a physical wave of nausea. I screamed that she was lying, that she was a master manipulator, and that she must have stolen my private photos to orchestrate this nightmare. I begged him to look at my character, to remember our 8 years of unbroken love, but the digital evidence was too overwhelming. In his mind, the photos from my private device were absolute proof of my guilt. In a frantic attempt to clear my name, we placed an immediate phone call to her, putting her on speakerphone to confront the accusations. I expected her to stumble or confess under pressure, but her response was chilling. She remained entirely calm, speaking with the cold, calculated precision of a clinical psychopath. In a soft, sorrowful voice, she told my husband that she was deeply sorry, but she could no longer continue lying to a good man just to save her friend's reputation. She looked him in the virtual eye and confirmed every single lie as absolute fact. The phone call ended, and the emotional dam broke in our home. A furious, chaotic argument erupted between my husband and me. The sheer volume of his anger was terrifying. Driven by a wave of pure, unadulterated betrayal, he refused to listen to my voice. He told me that our marriage was completely over, that he was filing for an immediate divorce, and that he demanded a legal paternity test the moment the child was born. He walked into our bedroom, grabbed my suitcases, and began throwing my clothes inside, demanding that I leave his sight immediately. The emotional hostility in that room reached a fever pitch. I was terrified for my safety and the safety of my unborn child, not from physical strikes, but from the sheer, volatile chaos of the verbal breakdown. I packed the remainder of my essential items through a blur of tears and fled the house in the middle of the night, retreating to the safety of my mother's home. The following days were a blur of deep clinical depression and panic. We immediately coordinated a prenatal legal paternity test through a specialized medical facility to prove the biological reality of our child. A week later, the official medical documentation arrived. The results were absolute and undeniable. The baby belonged entirely to my husband. But the tragedy was that the truth didn't fix the underlying damage. When I sent him the medical records, his heart remained hardened by the fake dating profile logs. He reasoned that while the child might biologically be his, the explicit messages regarding other men were still an unforgivable reality. We engaged in several more bitter, emotionally devastating arguments over the phone, with him constantly projecting his pain onto me, completely blind to the puppet strings controlling his reality. Chapter 4: The Hospital and the Confession. The sheer, unmitigated weight of being pregnant, homeless, and falsely accused of destroying my own family eventually took a massive toll on my physical health. One afternoon, while staying at my mother's house, my body simply collapsed under the immense psychological stress. I experienced severe physical complications, and my mother had to rush me to the emergency room of our local hospital. I was admitted immediately, hooked up to monitors, and placed on strict medical observation to ensure the severe anxiety didn't trigger a premature labor that could endanger our baby girl. It was this medical crisis that finally broke the illusion for my former best friend. Seeing the literal, life-threatening consequences of her malicious game seemed to force a sudden, terrifying moment of clarity upon her. Realizing that her web of lies had landed a pregnant woman in a hospital bed, she apparently panicked. She contacted my husband and demanded an immediate, urgent meeting. When they sat down, the entire house of cards collapsed. She confessed completely, admitting that every single screenshot, every single profile, and every piece of evidence he had seen was an absolute fabrication. She confessed that she had meticulously created both accounts, the fake profile using my stolen pictures, and the fictional male persona on the other end of the chat. When my husband asked her why on earth she would commit such an act of pure evil against the people who loved her, her justification was deeply pathetic. She claimed that she had been overcome by an all-consuming wave of intense jealousy. She argued that ever since I had announced my pregnancy, my husband had stopped paying attention to her during our group gatherings, and she felt completely cast aside. She claimed she had completely lost her mind and acted on impulse, never intending for the situation to escalate to the point of a divorce. She told him she genuinely believed he would just get angry with me for a few days, and then forgive me because she knew he loved me too much to let me go. It was the twisted logic of a deeply broken individual. Chapter 5. Uncovering the master plan. The moment the confession left her mouth, my husband's entire reality inverted. The monster he thought he was fighting didn't exist. He had exiled the innocent mother of his child. He rushed to the hospital, throwing himself at the foot of my medical bed, weeping uncontrollably and begging for my forgiveness in 1,000 different ways. Once my health stabilized and I was officially discharged from the medical facility, we began the long, agonizing process of untangling the sheer depth of the deception. We sat down together and forced her to walk us through the technical details of how she had pulled off such a flawless frame job. The level of planning she had poured into this betrayal was nothing short of terrifying. Because we operated a shared business together, she was a constant, daily presence inside our family home. She knew the exact layout of our property, and she knew precisely where I kept my old, decommissioned mobile device in the home office closet. She knew that the device was never actively monitored, but that the internal cloud systems were still connected to my primary photo streams. Day after day, while I was busy preparing meals or working in the other room, she would slip into the office, unlock the old device, and systematically download my private, unshared photographs. She then used those exact images to construct the dating profile. But she didn't stop there. To make the narrative completely bulletproof in the eyes of my husband, she had gone to extraordinary lengths. During our shared business trips, she had intentionally utilized her own personal credit cards to book specific boutique hotel rooms under the guise of corporate expenses. She then logged into the fake profiles and staged conversations where the fictional man thanked me for organizing those exact secret hotel rendezvous on those specific dates. She had even told my husband detailed, elaborate stories about how she had personally driven me to meet this non-existent individual, presenting her credit card statements as material proof of her involvement. It was a flawless, terrifying illusion built by someone who had access to every single corner of my life. Chapter 6. The Long Road to Reconstruction. Now, several months have passed since that horrific revelation, and we are currently living in the heavy, complicated aftermath of a reconstructed marriage. I made the conscious decision to return to our family home, determined to fight for the 8 years of love we had built before the shadow of our former friend tore us apart. But anyone who tells you that the truth instantly sets you free has never lived through a systemic trauma. The emotional scars left by our verbal conflicts and his immediate lack of belief in my innocence are not easily erased. We had spent years operating in a gentle, peaceful dynamic where shouting was non-existent. But during those dark weeks of false accusations, we both reached levels of raw, unbridled hostility that terrified us. The emotional safety of our home was completely violated. To this day, the psychological weight of that period hangs over our daily interactions. There are moments when the atmosphere in our home is quiet, and I will catch him staring at me with an expression of intense guilt and sorrow. He is doing everything in his power to atone for his lack of faith, attending intensive individual psychiatric therapy alongside our weekly couples counseling sessions. He has cut our former friend out of his life completely, initiating strict legal boundaries to ensure she can never step foot near our family again. We are currently pouring all of our remaining emotional energy into preparing for the arrival of our baby girl, whose birth is now just a few short weeks away. We are assembling her nursery, painting the walls, and purchasing the final items for her homecoming, using the routine of preparation as a shield against the residual trauma. We have made a solemn, binding promise to one another that the volatile chaos of the past will never be allowed to enter our home again. Our relationship is slowly, tentatively returning to the warmth we once knew, but we both walk forward with the sober understanding that while a marriage can survive the ultimate deception, the innocence of total trust can never be fully restored. It is truly chilling to realize that the person who stands beside you during your happiest moments can simultaneously be engineering the complete destruction of your life behind closed doors. The sheer, terrifying, calculated nature of what this friend did, using a hidden device, fabricating hotel receipts, and driving a pregnant woman into a hospital bed out of pure, unadulterated envy, is something you only expect to see in a psychological thriller. Thankfully, the truth finally prevailed. The paternity was proven, and this family is doing the heavy, necessary work of healing through professional therapy before their baby arrives. But I want to know your thoughts on this incredible resolution. Do you think you could ever truly find it in your heart to forgive a partner who believed a web of lies over your own voice? Or is that level of broken trust something you can never truly come back from? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat and you want to support the channel, please make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into real-life human drama. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you all in the very next video.